watch the screen.
So you have been totally manipulated.
Where's that?
The council chamber of the elders of cricket.
Just think about it.
Your friend has minutes to talk them out of unleashing the bomb.
Your history is just a series of freakishly improbable events. And having served my time on the Heart of Gold, I know an improbable event when it materializes a 6-foot stuffed pink aubergine in my shower cubicle. Your complete isolation from the galaxy was freakish for a start. Right out on the very edge, with a dust cloud around you. Then this spaceship that crash-landed on your planet. Oh, that's really likely, isn't it?
Alien female. Although it is very kind of you.
What are the odds against it intersecting perfectly with the orbit of the one planet in the galaxy that would be totally traumatized to learn that it wasn't alone? It's a setup. The spaceship was just a cleverly made fake.
She's right, I've seen it. It's a fake.
How depressingly predictable.
Someone was feeding you what you needed to know.
But we didn't
Of course you didn't realize it was going on. This is exactly my point. You never realized anything at all, like this supernova bomb.
How do you know about that?
I used scientific deduction, which is more than you have done. If you were bright enough to invent something that brilliant, you'd have worked out that it would take you with it as well.
What is this bomb thing anyway?
The supernova bomb. It's a very small bomb.
Yeah?
That could destroy the universe if activated. Good idea, if you ask me.
So where is it?
On the pillar standing between the elders and Trillion. Top of the screen. On command, the cricket robot next to Trillion will detonate it with his war club.
Dumb stupid that I very much doubt, that you've been able to build the bomb properly without any help from Haktar for the last 5 years.
Who's this Haktar guy?
The brains of the outfit. I feel sorry for him already.
Young lady, you have had your say in this matter. But as an alien life form, your deductions are ineluctably flawed. We have no alternative, therefore, but to carry out our plans.
No!
Robot, do your duty.
Marvin?
Nothing I can do. The robot's on an independent circuit.
Detonate the bomb.
Detonate the bomb.
Wait!
Wait.
Waiting.
You're very different from the people you rule on the ground. You've spent all your lives up here, where the atmosphere is thinner. You're more vulnerable to influences from beyond. Radiation, dust particles. The people don't want you to do this. Why don't you check with them first?
Detonate the bomb.
Detonate the bomb.
Oh!
Oops.
Okay, so you've got a nasty hole in your wall.
If that bomb's so brilliant, why didn't it go off?
It is brilliant, but they aren't. They've spent the last 5 years building it and they still haven't got it right. They're as stupid as any other organic life form. I hate them.
Influences from beyond. Radiation, dust particles. Elders of cricket, I need transportation. I need my friends, and I need them now.
But we need a hug.
Probability factor 3 to 1. Delete. 2 to 1 and 13 to 8.
Probability 1 to 1. We have normality. Deal with it.
I do miss the aroma of fresh pesto in a starship.
Come on, Arthur. You cleaned that dressing gown.
I miss being connected to a war computer about as much as I miss the pain I feel in all the diodes down my left-hand side. Which is not at all.
We're in position at the dust cloud perimeter, folks.
Ready?
We should have drawn straws.
Hey, uncool and potentially risky. Suppose I drew the short one.
How do we know there's anything out there apart from a cloud of black dust?
I could tell you if you asked me politely, which you wouldn't.
Please, Marvin?
A pocket of pseudo-gravity has opened around the ship, with an oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere.
We're being invited here. There's a very powerful intelligence at work.
Like you'd notice.
Greetings, radio listeners. We've just listened to a track from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And now it's time for ubRadio Salon. 2 hours of experimental frequencies performed live each week from the Chakra Chimp Research Kitchens of Northern California land and the Lava Lamp Lounge from Anywhen, Anywhere. Tonight's special remote guests are Austin Rich. This is episode number 624. We are broadcasting live on DFM Radio International, DFM.nu. Greetings to our listeners in the DFM IRC chat room. Sign in with your own IRC app. Details at the text chat link on the DFM.nu page. ubRadio Salon archives for all shows are available at the Internet Archive.org. Podcasts are available at iHeartRadio and TuneIn Radio. Now, let us begin our scheduled broadcast. In days when the reputation monger vigilantly ransacks the most obscure bypaths of literary Europe, in quest of new idols whom he may exploit and adore, it may fairly be regarded as amazing that the works of a writer possessing so unique a charm of individuality as those of George Rodenbach should have so long remained practically unknown to English lovers of continental literature. Of Maeterlinck, enough, and perhaps more than enough, has been written and said. A vivid and faithful translation of selections of the poetical works of Verhaeren and Miss Alma Stradle was published in 1879. While in the preceding year, his Les Aubes had been issued in an English dress through the instrumentality of a pen of Mr. Arthur Symons. But among the group of writers who constitute what has been described as the Belgian Renaissance, the claims of Rodenbach to any form of recognition have almost alone been regarded as entirely negligible. To anticipate a widespread popularity for either the poems or The novels of the author of Brogues La Mort is possibly enough a vain imagination. Fastidious and aristocratic by temperament, he himself held in but light esteem the suffrages of the mob. In a recent masterly study of Rodenbach by M. Heisemans, that most distinguished of contemporary Catholic writers, characterizes him felicitously as of the most extraordinary virtuoso of our time. And it is not altogether unlikely that his passions for recondite similes and analogies may render his works in a measure of cavalry to the general. A consummate artist, all that savored of flamboyance and turgidity was instinctively repugnant to his soul. Only the things appealed to him which were calm and old. Mission of any description he had assuredly none. It was from the dead towns of Flanders, these strange survivals of medievalism, that his inspiration came. The au nom sidou arando malins of his own tender, if unimpassioned verse, the pathetic ineffectuality of a speck which broods over them, combined with their elusive quality of aesthetic charm, to hold in captivity his imagination. In the grace of a tranquility which lulled to rest involuntarily all vehemence of emotion, he beheld the mirror of what was most congenial to his own moods. It was Brogues, of course, with which his name is now inseparably linked, that became to him an object of paramount literary consecration. Toujours l'obsession d'un ciel gris de Provence. It held him almost unintermittently within its grasp, even in the heyday of his hectic Parisian later life. It is generally assumed by those who possess only an imperfect acquaintanceship with his biographical details of Rodenbach's career that Brogues claimed him for its own. But it was the city only of his artistic adoption and not of his nativity. Born in 1855 under the shadow of the great cathedral of the barrier town of Tournai, he was educated at the University of Ghent, where his career was one of almost unbroken distinction. His selection, in the first instance, of a profession so aridly distasteful to the contemplative imagination as that of law, seems to partake somewhat of the nature of an irony of circumstance. Yet, within what was undeniably the uncongenial arena of the law courts, his forensic eloquence proved more than sufficiently convincing. Attracted to Brussels by the enhancement of possibilities which a capital ever affords, Rodenbach there flung himself into the advocacy of the literary crusade that had for its object the emancipation of the intellect of young Belgium, for the domination of the Philistinism under the yoke of which it had so long grown. It was, in course, of the controversies engendered by this uprising against decorated dullness that his true vocations were finally discovered. Brussels was, to him, however, no abiding city. The irresistible magnetism of Paris ere long drew him within the vortex of that febrile existence, whose blandishments have ever been so fraught with fascination for his countrymen. Here he associated upon terms of bohemian intimacy with the members of the literary world, who strove to preserve the flickering tradition of the beauté latine. The charm of the beautiful Zimmer club would seem to have held him in its thrall. With Émile Gardot, Maurice Rollians, Paul Arine, Bastien Lepage, Paul Bourget, Sarah Brownhouse, and other celebrities whose names I cannot quite pronounce, and still serve to invest even decadence with a certain distinction. He interchanged ideas, declaimed verses, and developed the genius which was to find its expression only in the worship of a sad and gray city. A voluminous writer, his biography exists merely in his works. The external record of his life is eventless. And meager. His domestic concerns appear to have remained unilluminated by the fierce light which, in these days, beats upon the household of the author. To the literary youths of Belgium, he was, however, invariably almost effusively sympathetic. The closest revelation of his somewhat enigmatic personality seems to be a portrait of Lévy de Mer, exhibited at the Paris Salon of 1896. The tragic death of George Rodenbach, while yet an inheritor of unfulfilled renown, at the close of December 1898, bringing with him, and with it, to the too limited circle of his admirers, a thrill of passionate regret, amounting almost to a sense of personal bereavement. Extinguishing career, the possibilities of which it is difficult adequately to gauge. The refrain of the last and perhaps the most exquisite of his shorter lyrics, written to greet the advent of the new year, which he was destined never to behold. Always the same dream, unachieved, reveals possibly the dissatisfaction of a temperament essentially introspective, with the comparative failure of the imagination to realize the ideals that the heart cherished. Of the 6 novels that Rodenbach had bequeathed to us, no less than 5 deal directly with the Bruges La Morte, which his genius has invested with such ineffable charm. So also do, though in a less tangible fashion, his solitary drama, and the 2 best known and least artificial of his volumes of verse. Even in the sketches, which he was wont to contribute with such frequency to the Parisian literary journals, the haze of his obsession interposed itself with an allurement of expression that beguiled many of his readers into setting forth upon a sentimental pilgrimage, from which, in the great majority of instances, they returned only the poorer by the loss of an illusion. Though shrinking with a characteristic dread of disenchantment from the deadening potentialities of familiarity with what was to him a city of dreams, there is conclusive enough internal evidence to demonstrate that Rodenbach never ceased to keep a vigilant eye upon the vandalism of a municipal administration, which was seemingly ever bent upon the vulgarization of his section. In the Carignan, for example, which indisputably falls to be reckoned, so far as local color is concerned, as the most realistic and the least pronounceable of his works, he reveals a fullness of knowledge in regard to the maneuvers of the civic fathers who hold in their custody the city of Van Eyck and Nîmes, that renders their refusal to sanction the erection of a statue to his memory the reverse of an enigma. That the Bruges of Rodenbach, however, is not, in great measure, an idealism can scarcely be denied. It is not so much Bruges as an abstraction of Bruges, that his horror of prosaic realism presents to the imagination all the unlovely features which are likely to jar upon romantic sensibilities, are rigorously excluded from the sphere of his perspective. The existence of an egregious English colony, tawdry, flaunting, brawling, and ubiquitous. The pinchbeck nature of many of the house restorations. The bi-weekly turmoil of a vast and unsightly market, the monthly saturnalia of a fair and unsurpassable vulgarity, are ignored with sublimity of indifference. Nothing that is common or unclean is permitted to derange the harmony of his artistic conception. To Rodenbach, the significance of Bruges lay only in the superb vista of the Lac Dormé, in the somber tranquility that reigns within the court of the Bougenet, in the picturesque richness of the garbles that embellish and insert waters of its canals, in the majestic beauty of its delicately gliding swans, in the towering sublimity of its inscrutable befroning. Perhaps above all in that odor of the sacristan, which still everywhere pervades the tangled skein of its streets. With a delicate sensitiveness of perception, he seizes upon detail that enhances the aesthetic value of the phenomena which constitute his material. The drowsy melody of the bells, the tender fogs, the melancholy poplars, the pale petunias, the water lilies, which symbolized ever to his imagination the hearts of the first communicants. In the preface to the best known of his works, Rodenbach avows, with characteristic definiteness, the nature of the neo-pagan conception which underlies his very romance. It is that of the evocation by a literary process, evolved by himself, of his beloved town, as an essential personage, associated with different conditions of the soul, counseling, prompting, and determining its action. That the execution is absolutely flawless. Not even the most pervaded admirer of Rodenbach can venture to maintain. Unhappily, for the perfection of his work, the author was afflicted with a duality of being, which renders its center of two conflicting tendencies. A Fleming by birth, Rodenbach was more than half Parisian by temperament, and the severe spiritual simplicity which is the birthright of the former was curiously blended in him with the passion for the bizarre that is the most prominent characteristic of the latter. While the book regarded from one side as mystic, devotional, and pessimistically tranquil, upon the other, it is weird, erotic, and melodramatic. It has to be borne in the mind in connection with the development of the plot that, in medieval times, Bruges was a reputed center of Satanism, and it is evidently to a latent instigation of this diabolism that Rodenbach attributes the crime for which his hero is apparently responsible. Unrivaled in power of description, it must be confessed that Rodenbach is not impeccable in matters of taste. In the faculty of extracting the immaterial from the material, he stands in the kingdom of letters without a single peer. In his hands alone, the inanimate ever becomes instinct with the graceful, fragile life. But while unapproachable as a delimiter of petrification, his modernity is frequently peculiarly vulnerable to all sorts of criticism. As an arena for the allurements of the demi-moderne, Bruges is the climax of artistic incongruity. Yet so deeply has the lubricity of the Parisian entered into the very soul of this novelist, that he of all men fails to perceive, and in a positiveness of such a presence in a romance, the scene of which is laid in so sternly ecclesiastical an atmosphere. Nonetheless, after deductions have been made, Bruges Le Mort remains of its kind the most exquisite study in modern literature. Of much abused phrase, local color we hear enough, and to spare but the trail of the itinerary is over it all. In its ordinary form, local color means nothing more than a sentimentalization of topography. Vitality or romance it has none. The term is a mere subterfuge for the veneering of an intolerable aridity. The achievement of Rodenbach is something differing wildly from all of this mundane criticism. For him, the merely external is devoid of all meaning. It was his supreme literary ambition to make the dry bones live again. In his eyes, the artist is the reverse, in every respect, of the photographer, and of all incarcerated and incarnated things, the most repugnant to his imagination must have been the soullessness of a Baedeker. Yet, unlike Pater, the only English writer, with the exception, possibly, of Harley, to whom he bears any resemblance, his word painting is as precise as it is poetical. With all its imperfections, his idealization proves to continue to make an enduring appeal, upon the one hand, to that order of imagination which finds an anodyne in the depiction of a despondent tranquility, and upon the other, to the type that succumbs to the fascination of the medievalization of bequeathed in those cathedrals. We are now impotent even to restore such a perspective. The novels of Thomas Hardy and those of the author of Bruges Le Mort, a certain parallel is easily established. The promptings to action of a somber environment are portrayed in The Return of the Native and The Woodlanders, in a manner which is essentially that adopted by Rodenbach. The gloom that broods over Dukedom is practically identical with that which hangs over Bruges, though in the latter instance, its ascendancy is greatly denser. intensity. Karyama, which embodies precisely the same method of literary treatment we encounter, at least in incomparably more robust piece, and no longer the refuge of a sentimental misanthropy. Brooks is depicted in its pages as undergoing the preliminary throes of impending aesthetic dissolution. The old order of things is menaced by the machinations of an intriguing protocol bent upon carrying out the scheme of iconoclastic utilitarianism. Hating bourgeois with a hatred that rivals in its intensity that of a Flaubert, a Masson, a Gautier, or some other French person. Rodenbach here pillories in a manner which displays more power of touch with actuality than many of his own admirers, which have credited him with possessing the chicane, the insensibility to all which is not material, the vandalism that cannot recognize in beauty even a form of revenue which characterizes the administration of a provincial town harassed by the custody of an artistic heritage, the loveliness of which it cannot comprehend, and the value of which it cannot appraise. That his soul should, in this volume, have been stirred to a red heat of indignation was in no way astonishing. The handwritten note was upon the wall. The shadow of the destroyer, in the shape of a maritime canal, was hovering around the effectiveness which he had enshrined. Brooks was to be Brooks Lamont no more. The relentless commercialism, which was like the grave spares and gives nothing back, now threatened the existence of what to him was almost a religion. The novel, therefore, inevitably becomes a species of Hellenic tragedy, moving softly and sternly to the appointed end. The victim of an implacable destiny, Jorge Borlut, the Collinere, an uncompromising embodiment of all the traits of the artistic reactionary, is depicted through, in Prometheus fashion, as a mere target for the buffets of adversity. An object lesson to all belated enough to run the hazard of excommunication at the hands of modern progress. Almost no particle of alleviation enters into the final tragedy of his career. In the culmination of of the fate-stricken hero of his novel by a sufficiently dramatic suicide within the Tower of Belfroy, it would almost seem as if Rodenbach thus meant, in his emblematic fashion, to symbolize the impending annihilation of the beauty of Bruges. Odysseus de la vie. Odysseus de la vie. Odysseus de la vie. Odysseus de la vie. Above the life. Above the life. Above the life. Above the life. In this ever-recurrent phrase, which seems almost to dominate the book, can be discovered the solution of the enigma presented by the ineffectuality of Rodenbach's protagonists. Striving ever after the unattainable, they fail utterly to adjust themselves to the actual conditions of their own meager existence. The imagination holds them for its own. In the domination of art, they can be ranked only as consecrations of futility. A lot of Jean Rembrandt, the hero of L'Art en Exile, is no whit less tragic than that of his compatriots. Like them, his career may be epitomized in the word frustration. A poet torn from the Paris that his heart once loved, and recalled by the pressure of family conditions to the stagnation of a provincial town, where only Mammon is held in reverence. His life is rendered a martyrdom by the enmity of the rancorous mediocrity that surrounds him. The isolation which awaits him in his own household proves, however, tenfold more disarming. Suffocated by the influences of environment, he relapses into apathy and inertia. Verily, the pagan of Mr. Swinburne's hymn to Proserpine stands here justified. Ye is not even Apollo, hair and harp string of gold, a bitter god to follow, a beautiful god to behold. In the Musée de Belgique, we discover Rodenbach in a lighter mood, endowed with the peculiar magic of style which renders the commonplace attractive and the uninteresting particularly interesting. He analyzes this volume of sketches which marvelously, delicately brings insight, the traits that lie hidden within the hearts of the picturesque sisterhood, the members of which reappear with such remarkable and persistency throughout the whole course of his weeks. In a type of character that approaches subtlety upon one hand, as closely as it does simplicity upon the other, he finds a congenial outlet for that love of psychological dissection, which was always dear to him, much like the voice of Uncle Bill Burroughs. Here no element of violence obtrudes itself. All trace of Rodenbach the Parisian has completely vanished. The literary atmosphere is one of perfect stillness. The recluses, with minds as spotless as the snowy purity of their cornets, are as vividly realized as the virgins of Vebken's world-renowned chase of Saint Ursula. La Vocation, which is the least pleasing of Rodenbach's studies, should have been skipped, and yet we are continuing to discuss it anyway, as it deals with scruples of conscience that are well nigh incomprehensible to the Protestant mind, and are therefore of great interest to the prurient mind. Yet, in the intensity of its Catholicism, there subsists a harmony with the austere religious background in which no sin would seem to hold any sway as being venial. For as in Spain, from whence Flanders derived its faith, the wave contrition is hard, and lifelong repentance bears with it no security of expiation. The descriptions of grooves are here characterized by even more than the writer's ordinary power of artistic extraction, but the lack of relief to the picture of hopeless self-condemnation, which leaves a painful impression upon the mind of the reader. Destruction of all that is primitive and archaic by the intrusion of a railway into a remote district of the island of Zealand is the subject of Rodenbach's final novel. Virtually an arraignment of modern progress, it portrays graphically the introduction of pastoral evil, of all that which debases the residuum of a large manufacturing town. The trampling down of an idyllic life, which is, however, more than a trifle too reminiscent of the golden age of acceptance at the hands of modern skepticism by the extricated strangers, affords the writer ample room for a more than sufficiently harrowing delineation. Convincing enough from an anti-utilitarian standpoint, the book fails to make the impression upon the imagination which the nature of the subject demands. Verisimilitude is lacking. The over-refining of the Dutch peasant carried to a pitch of excess. The poetry of Rodenbach is permeated by the same qualities as those which will serve to attract and repel the reader in his prose. The process of dematerialization, however, of which he was so deeply ignorant, is naturally carrying his verse to a far greater degree of elusiveness than was possible in the more circumscribed region of the moon. With a mingling-esque muteness of observation, he endeavors in his stanzas to infuse its soul, even the most insignificant of the objects which his imagination tends to dwell upon. The pathos hid in inanimate things always seemed to appeal to him in an unnatural way, especially when they were humanized by the neglect and misuse of other people. Even the poetry of domestic belongings, such as perhaps a knife and fork, invisible to others, were absolutely recognizable by him and could not be ignored under any circumstances. Strenuousness of any description finds no place in his world of lassitude. The keynote of his verse, indeed, is not infrequently that of paganism, which has waxed, and is content to shadow forth only the things that are plaintive and frail. It is again from Bruggs that Rodenbach derives the inspiration upon which the durability of his reputation as a poet must chiefly lodge. The shackles of the Parisian artificiality, which at intervals held him in the bondage of a worship of very strange gods, are rent asunder as he approaches that October of stones, which had even been to him as a Mecca in the wilderness. It is consequently upon the 2 volumes of his verse, L'Origine du Silence and Le Memoire du Série Natel, which treat almost exclusively of roots, and critical attention will in a great measure be disposed to concentrate itself. Intensely subjective in his adoption of a method, no allurement can induce Rodenbach to deviate an iota from his plan. Even faded historical glories of Bruggs are included in the rigor of his eliminations. Such emotions as those which thrilled Rossetti are to him as the commonplaces of the tourists. Wordsworth, it is true, in his 2 unforgettable sonnets, has, in an imperfect fashion, foreshadowed Rodenbach's interpretation of his sad northern Venice. But the halo of its medievalism has, of the 2 influences, left an impression upon the mind of the English poet deeper than the pathos of its decrepitude. To Rodenbach, Bruggs presented itself under a guise akin to that of Tennyson's Island Valley of Avalon, where falls not hail, or rain, or any snow. Not even wind blows loudly, merely quietly. From it, as a fastness of pensive tranquility, all note of discord is suddenly banished. Clamor is unknown. spell of its indolent sweetness is unbroken by the harshness of voices from beyond. A straining after remote analogies, which are fatiguing to unravel, are too far-fetched for felicity, detract largely from the enjoyment of Rodenbach's verse. Yet, in the identification of his emotions with his surroundings, there is ever a thinly hidden significance which contains the indefinable essence that is essential for poetry. The esoteric is not without its magic, and there is witchery in the refinements of a melancholy which would have ravished the heart of Jacques and led him forth a captive even from the forest of Arden. The oval subtleties and mispronunciation, the lacking in simplicity as the muse of the Rodenbach may be for inspiration, and serves to least to render the justice with the lulling completeness to the languid captivation of a city, from whose towers, to borrow the language of Matthew Arnold, still breathe the enchantments of the Middle Ages. The inner spirit lying at the heart of its waters, the eloquence of the silence emanating from its streets, the floating melody issuing from its bells, the melancholy air of the ancient distinction attached to its houses. All, indeed, that make Bruges a city of the soul.
Eddie?
Airlock
The last time I walked out of an airlock in deep space, the Vogons were pushing me. I can't believe I volunteered to do it again. Look, Trisha, if anything happens to us...
Listen.
I can't hear anything.
So, the pressure here is equal to the cabin pressure in the Heart of Gold.
And that suggests you're right about this?
I hope so. Hector? Hector! I would like you to meet my friend, Arthur Dent. I wanted to go off with the Thunder God, but he stopped me, and I really appreciate that. He made me realize where my affections really lay.
Oh, is that actually relevant right now?
I'm not sure. Hello? Hector?
Won't you both come out? I promise that you're perfectly safe.
By which people usually mean we're not.
Come on, Arthur.
But it's empty space.
Have faith.
I do. I also have fear and a propensity to bruising.
I have nothing to offer you by way of hospitality but tricks of the light. It is possible to be comfortable with tricks of the light, though, if that is all you have.
Good grief. It's a sofa. The sofa. The one that Ford and I escaped from prehistoric Earth on. Why does the universe keep doing these insanely bewildering things to me?
Please, make yourselves comfortable.
Oh, yes, thank you.
It's like an old friend.
And I really must congratulate you on the accuracy of your deductions.
Well, I didn't deduce anything myself. I'm just here because I'm sort of interested in life, the universe, and everything.
That is something in which I, too, have an interest.
Well, we should have a chat about it sometime. Over a cup of tea. Impressive. I'll be mother, then, shall I? Oh.
I'm afraid the tea table is just a trick of the light.
Hector, if the universe interests you so much, why do you feel you have to destroy it?
Oh, dear. Perhaps a psychiatrist's couch would have served us better.
Oh, I think I preferred the sofa. Thank you.
Can you construct real things, too? I mean, solid objects?
You are thinking of the spaceship. Yes, I can. But it takes enormous effort and time. All I can do in my particle state, you see, is encourage and suggest. Tiny pieces of space debris, a few molecules here, a few hydrogen atoms there. I encourage them together. I can tease them into shape, but it takes many eons.
So, did you make the wrecked spacecraft that crashed on Cricket?
It seemed the best thing to do.
Best?
I repented, you see, for sabotaging my own design for the Silastic armor fiends. It was not my place to make such decisions. I was created to fulfill a function, and I failed in it. I negated my own existence.
Go on.
I deliberately nurtured the planet of Cricket till they would arrive at the same state of mind as the people who built me and require of me the design of the bomb I failed to make the first time. I wrapped myself around the planet and coddled it. Under the influence of events I was able to generate, they learned to hate like maniacs. Mind you, I had to make them live in the sky. On the ground, my influences were too weak.
You've caused the deaths of millions.
When they were locked away from me in the envelope of slow time, their responses became very confused, and they were unable to manage.
Which is why their bomb was a dud.
I was only trying to fulfill my function.
Nothing else?
Well, there was also the little matter of revenge. Of course, I was pulverized, then left in a crippled and semi-impotent state for billions of years. And there's nothing quite like wiping out the universe to get your point across.
You know what we have to do?
Yes, you're going to disperse me. This is your function, to destroy my consciousness. Well, be my guest. After all these eons, all I crave is oblivion. If I haven't already fulfilled my function, then it's too late. Data ends. Thank you.
Arthur?
And good night.
The atmosphere pocket is dissipating.
And the sofa's disappearing. Jump! Eddie, the vibration field. Quickly!
No problem.
That should take care of the dust cloud.
Listen.
I have fulfilled my function.
It's Hector.
I have fulfilled my function.
I think he's glad to have the burden of existence lifted.
Some people have all the luck.
I have fulfilled my function.
Well, that would appear to be that. Just about.
Just about?
I think we should take the ashes back to Lord's. I feel that very strongly.
Some charred bits of cricket stump. Why?
It's a matter of national pride. I'm not sure you'd understand.
Are you proposing the injudicious use of time travel?
Homesick, monkey man.
If we give them back moments after they were stolen, no one will be any the wiser.
Why bother? The Earth gets blown up a day later, no matter what you do.
It just seems important to do it. We'd only have to travel back a day or so in time.
This is precisely the sort of gratuitous and irresponsible mucking about that the Campaign for Real Time is trying to put a stop to.
Ah, but you try and explain that to the MCC.
I won't be a party to it. Kindly return me to the Starship Bistromouth at once.
Okay, old man. Keep your beard on. We'll drop you off. You and the guy I picked up on the way over.
What guy?
Says his name is Prack. He's on the run from the Argabuthon Witness Protection Program.
Prack? The Prack?
He keeps talking non-stop. Doesn't make much sense.
Trillian, are you all right?
It was in the Sidereal Daily Mention, a big story. He wouldn't give evidence at some trial, so they administered a new truth drug just when the cricket robots broke in and stole the Argabuthon Sceptre of Justice.
The Perspex Pillar of Science?
In the chaos, the bailiff accidentally gave Prack 10 times the maximum dose. Once the trial resumed, they made the worst request imaginable of someone in Prack's condition. They asked him to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And he told it. For all they know, he's still telling it. Strange, terrible things. Things that would drive you mad.
Yeah, if a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, omniscience must be lethal.
But if he knows all truth, then presumably he'd know what the ultimate question to the ultimate answer is. It's always bothered me that we never found out.
Yeah? Well, it's your call.
No!
Let's ask him.
Thank Zarquan, the whole soundproof. This motor mouth can really ratchet.
Poor thing.
Door open.
My pleasure to allow you admittance to the hold.
Hello?
Oh, hello. Do you have a cigarette?
Sorry, no.
Hi, pal. What's going on?
Nothing.
We thought you'd be still telling the truth. Whole and nothing but.
Oh, that? I was, but then I finished. Yeah, really? But not nearly as much of it as people imagine. Some of it is pretty funny, though.
Oh,
Tell me about it. Oh, I can't remember any of it now. I thought of writing some of it down, but then I thought, why bother?
Hey, buddy. You okay?
I'm not sure I haven't done myself an injury.
You remember none of it?
No. Oh, except most of the good bits were about frogs. I remember that. Oh, dear. Frogs were... You wouldn't believe some of the things about frogs. Come on, let's go and find ourselves a frog. Boy, will I ever see them in a new light.
Nothing more profound?
Now, let's go and find a frog I can laugh at. Oh, a tadpole would... No, I can't. Sorry, who are you?
My name is Trillian.
Uh-huh.
A Ford prefect.
Oh, yeah.
And I am Seyfarth Beeblebrox.
So what? And what's this?
Me? Oh, my name's Arthur Dent.
No kidding. Well, you're Arthur Dent? Well, the Arthur Dent? Blimey! You...
Well...
Arthur Dent, you really... You just leave the frogs standing. Oh!
He's not well. The constant laughing's wrecked his body.
Oh. You wanted to ask me something.
How do you know that?
Because it's true.
Well, I did have a question. Or rather, what I actually have is an answer. I wanted to know what the question was.
Uh-huh.
Well, the question I would like to know is the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything.
Yeah.
All we know is that the answer is 42, which is a little aggravating. 42?
Yeah.
Yes. That's right.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't know? Yes, the question and the answer are mutually exclusive, I'm afraid. Knowledge of one logically precludes knowledge of the other. It is impossible that both can ever be known about in the same universe.
Oh.
Yeah. Except if it happened, it seems that the question and the answer would just cancel each other out. Oh, and take the universe with them, which would then be replaced by something even more bizarrely inexplicable. It is possible, of course, that this has already happened, but there is a certain amount of uncertainty about it.
There certainly is.
Yeah.
I was just hoping there might have been some sort of reason.
Well, actually, there is one other thing I can remember. Apart from the frogs. Later. What was it? Oh, yes! God's last message to his creation. Would you like to know what it is?
Ford?
Look, do you want to know about it or not?
Yeah.
Okay, then.
Yes, all right.
Well, if you're that interested, I suggest you go and look for it. It is written in 30-foot-high letters of fire on top of the Quentalus Quasgar Mountains in the land of Savor-Biopstri on the planet Preliumtan, third out from the sun's arse in galactic sector QQ7 active J Gamma. It is guarded by the majestic Vantracell of Lob.
Sorry, it's where?
It is written in 30-foot-high letters of fire on top of the Quentalus Quasgar Mountains in the land of Savor-Biopstri on the planet Preliumtan. You might want to write this down. Third out...
Sorry, which mountains?
The Quentalus Quasgar Mountains in the land of Savor-Biopstri on the planet...
Have you got a pencil?
Me?
Which land was that? I didn't quite catch it.
Savor-Biopstri on the planet...
Savor-Biopstri?
Well, for heaven's sake...
Oh, poor thing. It was too much for him.
Bummer.
How about it, Arthur? Want to go in search of God's last message to his creation?
Not just now, thanks.
Fair enough.
Welcome back, radio listeners. We've just returned from the intermission segment of the program. and we played another excerpt from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is, of course, hour 2 of the ubRadio Salon here on DFM Radio International. Episode number 624. I am your special remote guest announcer.
Yeah, how's that working out for
Austin
you?
Rich, here from the Lava Lamp Lounge in beautiful Anywhere, Anywhen.
And you can't hear me at all. This is great.
Now, let's get back into some more experimental music. Enjoy. Always stay in your own movie. Ken Kesey. If you take the name of a certain former Vice President, Spiro Agnew, and scramble the letters around, you can rearrange it to spell out, grow a penis. Such appropriateness can give your boundaries of coincidence permanent stretch marks. After all, when Senator Charles Goodell came out against the war in Vietnam, it was Agnew who called him the Christine Jorgensen of the Republican Party, thus equating military might with the mere presence of a cock. Years ago, when Mike Wallace interviewed me for 60 Minutes, he asked about the difference between the underground press and the mainstream media. I told him about the above anagram. And I said,
"The difference is that I could print that in a magazine like The Realist, but it would be edited out of this very program."
My prediction was accurate. So, naturally, I took an immediate vow never to appear on any television show ever again unstoned. Which, in turn, explains why eating magic mushrooms was practically a prerequisite for my being interviewed by Tom Schneider himself. Now, Andy Friendly had only been doing his job when he was reading the Sex and Dope issue of High Times in September of 1978. Nice work if you can get it. As a producer of The Tomorrow Show, he was always on the lookout for potential guests, and there was a particularly bizarre interview with me in that issue, so he called up to invite me onto the show. Now, there were a few follow-up phone conversations to explore certain areas that the televised interview might happen to cover. The the subject of drug use came up. And I said, well, maybe we could talk about my psychedelic macho. I've taken LSD in all kinds of unusual situations and circumstances. When I testified at the Chicago conspiracy trial and the Johnny Carson program. Can you imagine me hanging out with the band on LSD? Orson Bean was the guest host that evening. I can tell you that much. I was sort of a guide for Groucho Marx once. While I was researching the Manson case, I took acid with a few women in the family, including Squeaky Fromme and Sandra Good. It was a kind of participatory journalism. Maybe you've heard the phrase before, gonzo. The interview was scheduled for November 30th. That's my birthday, said Abby Hoffman, still on the lam at the time. Would you wish me a happy birthday on the program? Abby conjectured. The Tomorrow Show flew me from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and a chauffeured limousine delivered me to a fancy hotel where I proceeded to partake of those alleged magic mushrooms. My mood was intensely sensual. What I really wanted was what I referred to as an exquisite massage. I called my old friend, who happened to be a professional masseuse. Since she was also an old lover, it was not totally surprising that we began fucking on the bed before she even set up her table. She was finally broke. The sweet silence of our post-coital afterglow was excellent, and she delivered this whisper. I'll still have to charge you for the massage. November 1978 was the month of that unspeakable Jonestown massacre, and a week later, a political assassination of San Francisco Mayor George Moscone and gay supervisor Harvey Milk by ex-cop Dan White. The mushrooms were really coming on strong when Tom Snyder, who has an FM mind in an AM body, as they say, and was apparently doing some sort of impression of a Saturday Night Live routine or something. Maybe Dan Aykroyd did or whatever. Actually, I can't even tell you what it was. Anyways, it was something about being in San Francisco. Anyway, yeah, I began. My city's more violent than yours. When he asked me about the trip with Gaucho, I replied, well, that's a whole other context. But due to the demands of televised pacing, we barely got into it before Schneider wanted to know about my 6-month-old and this publisher over at Hustler and what it was that I had done with the Hare Krishnas and the various pushers that are at the airports and whatnot. What a bore. Why am I here? What's going on? I thought I understood this show, but I keep hearing voices in my head. I'm trying to concentrate and it wants to know about all this stuff, and I'm just trying to read this text and keep it together. just before the show ended, though, I managed to remember to wish Abby Hoffman a happy birthday. And, well, that's about it. There was, however, a Timothy Leary connection. Think of this as a piece of combat history. We're going to go to war here in a moment. To fully understand the context in which this battle for the will has been taking place, you really need to retrace the chronological profile of G. Gordon Liddy from his role as a Poughkeepsie District Attorney who raided Millbrook Mansion, where LSD was an experimental sacrament, to his function as a CIA operative who offered to assassinate Jack Anderson on behalf of the Nixon administration, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Had Liddy been given the go-ahead, columnist Anderson wouldn't have been around to embarrass the Carter administration into not invading Iran. And we might be in the middle of World War III at this exact moment. Let me backtrack here a moment. In 1963, in my capacity as editor and Zen bastard of The Realist, I had assigned Robert Anton Wilson to investigate the game being played at Millbrook. This was perfect for him. He was going to love it. We've been joking about it for a while, but I actually pulled the trigger. He couldn't say no. In my capacity as stand-up comic and drug virgin, I had been poking fun at all the highs I had never tried. Wilson came back and presented me with our cover story, Timothy Leary and his pathological H-bomb. After it was published, Leary called to invite me for a weekend at Millbrook. Working with him, where Ralph Metzner and Richard Alpert, somehow, despite all the accoutrements of Eastern religion, the scene was quite American. Even this top level of the psychedelic hierarchy consisted of a Catholic, Protestant, and a Jew. But there was no punchline coming. We were performing a cosmic task. The trio of PhD dropouts, helping to spread the expansion of consciousness in the middle of a sadomasochistic empire, whose perpetuation demanded upon the mass contraction of consciousness. Originally, the CIA had intended to use LSD as one more means of manipulating the population. That scenario, of course, backfired. A generation who trusted their friends more than their government deprogrammed themselves from the society that had shaped them, and then reprogrammed themselves in an infinite variety of incarnations. The think tanks had not formulated a contingency plan for this counterculture that was refusing to be brainwashed into becoming consumer and military zombies. This mutation would certainly have to be discredited somehow. LSD influenced music, painting, spirituality, and the stock market, if you can believe it. Tim Leary himself let me listen to a call from a Wall Street broker, thanking him for turning him on to acid because it had given him the courage to finally sell short. Leary had a certain sense of pride about famous folks he and his associates had introduced to the magical potion. There are stories of Cary Grant, who had become a father at age 74 thanks to LSD. And likewise, Herman Kahn of the Hudson Institute now talked about spasms of information. Years later, I gave Kahn a superficial tour of the Lower East Side. We stopped in at a bookstore. Among the thinker of the unthinkables purchases was LSD and Problem Solving by Peter Stafford, a text that I contend to this very day is essential for any person's eventual mind expansion. Meanwhile, I had become gung-ho about being an acid head, a public propagandist. I wrote a lot about LSD. I made up some of it, but I also told the very honest and brutal truth, and I think that's important. Sometimes I would take a tab right on stage at the beginning of a performance, verbally sharing my journey with the audience, hoping I could get a few laughs in while simultaneously maintaining my juggling act without dropping any chromosomes or damaging them too badly. But this isn't just throat clearing. There's a story to be told as well. The Charles Manson connection is incredibly important. So please put on some Beach Boys and dig this vibe. There's a new wave band. Calls themselves Sharon Tate's Baby or something like that. It's a tribute to time warps and space travel. For it is now nearly a dozen years since Charles Manson, a victim executioner sired by the prison system, dispatched his perverted commune to mutilate and kill a group of people in the privacy of their very own home. Maybe you saw a big blockbuster film about it. Among the slain was Sharon Tate, a pregnant actress. Her husband, the controversial Roman Polanski, director of Rosemary's Baby, was out of the country at the time. Now, he is out of the country again. This time, to avoid prosecution for consorting with the voluptuous 13-year-old. Young idealists on their way to Woodstock that weekend in the summer of '69 kept passing newsstands with headlines of the gory multiple murder. Not all the details had emerged. Others dead: Jay Sebring, hairdresser, dealer of marijuana and cocaine. Earlier that evening, a member of a coke ring had appeared at the house. His body would later be found stuffed in a car trunk in New York. Wojciech Wodowski, who was with Sebring, was preparing to become a U.S. distributor of MDA. Abigail Folger, coffee heiress, girlfriend of Frokowski, and campaigner of Tom Bradley, LA's first black mayor. She was a far cry from the conservative image of Miss Olsen in her father's TV commercials. Manson was an eclectic. He borrowed techniques from transcendental analysis and Scientology alike. There was even the Scientology e-meter, a lie detector, on the blind man's ranch where Charlie kept his harem. He used sex and music and isolation and ritual and fakery, whatever worked. He was a pimp and a hypnotist. He dispensed LSD tablets as though they were time-released dog nuts. Here, have one. It's a treat. You've been a good boy. Why not? I interviewed Preston Gilroy, who had been a deputy of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, and they had eventually busted the Manson range. He stated that before the murders, they had been told to leave Charlie alone, despite complaints about his violations of parole, including, ironically, statutory rape, because something big was coming down. Why were you given such an order? I don't know, Gilroy replied. He didn't question our superiors. Did you at least speculate as to the reason? I asked. Oh, we just figured that they were going to kill some Black Panthers or something. Thus did the racism and the sheriffs render them collaborators of Charles Manson, who had wanted to start a race war. He instructed his followers to leave clues, making it appear that black militants were responsible for the killings. When the family was arrested, however, it merely served to give hippies a bad name. Before Willie Nelson made the look respectable again, there was John Linley Frazier, a long-haired, headbanded freak in the Santa Cruz Mountains who was involved in an awesome mass murder a year after Charles Manson. He later became a prison mate of Manson, mentioning in a letter that me and Charlie are still trying to figure out how long our leashes were and who's been pissing on them. And so it came to pass that Charles Manson was stuck in solitary confinement at Folsom Prison when a new inmate was placed in the adjoining cell. It was, in fact, Tim Leary, fresh from being hounded around the world. He was eventually captured with Joanna Harcourt Smith, who later admitted working for the DEA. Where's that AMC TV series? They took you off the streets, Manson informed Leary, so that I could continue with your work. Charlie couldn't understand how Leary had given so many people acid without trying to control them. Still, I remember a certain vested interest Leary had in having been a catalyst for their transformation. He enjoyed whatever influence he had wielded in the change of attitude towards LSD that Henry Luce had brought to time and work. But Leary once remarked, I consider Otto Preminger one of our exclusive flailers. So much so that I can't quite pronounce failure correctly. The Otto Preminger connection is also very important, so let me not derail for long. The FBI has been getting quite a bit of bad press lately, if you can believe it. They were being accused, of all things, of hounding Gene Seberg to suicide. Documents proved they had spread a story that she was pregnant by a leader of the Black Panther Party. Then, in order to defend itself, the FBI released their tape of a tapped phone conversation wherein Gene Seberg, a surprised Panther, where Gene Seberg tells a surprised Panther, that's probably a more important way of phrasing it, about how pleased he would be that she is carrying his baby. Juicy gossip indeed. You cannot believe this stuff. Anyway, let me continue. It is enough to make the left and right lobes of your brain start humping each other when you hear stuff like this. What will the next layer of reality be? Will yet another document reveal that the Black Panther was actually an undercover agent as well? Who knows? But the FBI was not the first to toy with Jean Seberg's destiny. She was originally chosen from among thousands of contestants by Otto Preminger for the starring role in his film, Joan of Arc. Maybe you've heard of her. While she was being burned at the stake, her garments actually did catch on fire. Jean Seberg screamed with a passion for survival at that very moment. It seemed to preclude the possibility of ever taking her own life. And Otto Preminger, bless his professional heart, knew that this was one scene he had on the first take, which of course is a money-saving device and is quite important to him. I've met Preminger on 2 occasions. The first was in 1960. I was conducting a panel on censorship for Playboy magazine. Preminger had defied Hollywood's official seal of approval by not censoring The Moon is Blue. In retrospect, it hardly looks courageous, but Preminger refused to take out the word virgin. Anyway, at the end of our interview, he asked, "When you transcribe this, will you fix up my English?" "Oh, sure," I replied quickly. "Of course." He glared at me and shouted, "Why? What's wrong with my English?" The second time I saw Preminger was a decade later. We were both guests on the Merv Griffin show. Orson Bean was the guest host again. I had taken mescaline for the occasion, I believe. Another guest was comedian Jackie Vernon, responding to the length of my hair. He said, "Why don't you take a bath?" Nobody had ever asked me that on network television before. Later, Monday morning quarterbacking, George Carlin would have an Aikido-like suggestion. "You shouldn't have said, 'Why, thank you, Jackie, I hadn't considered that.'" But at that instant, I was caught off balance and just kept silent. So did the audience. The tension was broken by Otto, of course. "That is the sickness of our society, the stereotype, autotitude." Now the audience applauded, and then he went to commercial. There is a definite rhythm a director brings to a TV talk show, as it were. Between those 2 occasions, Otto Preminger made a movie called Skidoo. It was pro-acid propaganda, thinly described as a comedy adventure. And the part of the mafia chieftain named God was, of course, played by Groucho Marx himself. Recently, Tim Leary cheerfully admitted to me I was fooled by Otto Preminger. He was hipper than I was. But then again, some people just hide it well. The Lenny Bruce connection is also relevant, so let me get back to my Steve Allen anecdote. He had become the first describer to the realist in 1958. He sent in several gift subscriptions, including one for Lenny, who was busy fighting the press, which had labeled him as a sick comic in those days. Lenny and I had developed a close friendship, and in 1962, Playboy had assigned me as editor of his autobiography, How to Talk Dirty and Influence People, which they were serializing for obvious reasons. Traveling around with Lenny Bruce was an incredible delight. There are stories I just cannot even begin to tell you. It was a theatrical education to watch him sculpt his offstage perceptions into onstage routines. But as his environment became more and more courtroom-centric, so did the contradictions of the law become more and more the canvas for his craft. Although Lenny was a tremendous influence on me as a performer, I was not at all into drugs at the time. Once I asked him about the apparent inconsistency between his free-form lifestyle and his having to stop everything in order to shoot up, and he simply replied, "Well, you stop to eat, don't you?" He described heroin, "It's like kissing God." And who could fault him for that? In the winter of 1964, stoned and on a combination of DMT and LSD, Lenny fell backward through the window of his San Francisco hotel room. At the precise moment that he was suspended in midair, he uttered, "Man shall rise above the rule." Then he surrendered to the law of gravity and plummeted to the sidewalk below. Both legs had to be put in casts, and for a while, he became a hermit of Hollywood Hills. Around that time, Jerry Hopkins, who had opened the first head shop in LA, and later became the biographer of Elvis and Jim Morrison, was producing The Steve Allen Show. He arranged for me to do a one-night stand at the Steve Allen Theater. Lenny Bruce was in the audience, and so was Groucho Marx. At one point in the show, I was talking about the importance of having empathy for other people's perversions. During a question and answer session, which followed, Lenny stood up on his crutches and asked what I had meant by that. Well, once I was sitting in the subway. It was rush hour and really crowded, and an elderly lady's buttocks kept rubbing against my shoulder, and I began to get aroused. "You're sick!" Lenny yelled. "Thank you, Mr. President," I responded, ending the show right there. Later, I met Groucho Marx for the very first time. "That was very smart the way you finished," he said. "Besides, I was getting a little fidgety in my chair." Groucho and I ingested these little white tabs one afternoon at the home of an actress in Beverly Hills. Groucho was interested in the social background of the drug. There were two items that particularly tickled his fancy. One was that the day acid was outlawed, hippies were standing around the streets, waiting for the exact anointed moment to strike so that they could all publicly swallow their LSD the exact second it became illegal. The other was how the tour bus would pass through Haight-Ashbury, and passengers would try to take snapshots of the local alien creatures, who in turn would hold mirrors up to the bus windows so that the tourists would see themselves focusing their cameras. I told Groucho about the first thing I ever sold to the old Steve Allen Show. It was a sketch called Unsung Heroes of Television. Among the heroes was the individual whose sole job it was to listen intently the whole half hour for somebody to say the secret word on You Bet Your Life, and then to drop the decoy duck when the word was said. He told me about one of his favorite contestants, a gentleman with white hair, on in years, but a chipper fellow. I inquired as to what he did to retain such sunny disposition. Well, I'll tell you, Groucho, he says. Every morning, I get up and I make a choice to be happy that day. We had long periods of silence and listening to music. I was accustomed to playing rock and roll while tripping. But the record collection here was all classical and Broadway show albums. After we heard the Bach Cantata number 7, Groucho said, I may be Jewish, but I was seeing the most beautiful visions of Gothic cathedrals. Do you think Bach knew he was doing that? Later, we were listening to the score of a musical comedy, Fanny. There was one song called Welcome Home, where the lyrics go something like, Welcome home, says the clock. And the chair says, Welcome home. And so do various other pieces of furniture. Groucho started acting out each line as if he were actually being greeted by the clock, the chair, and so forth. He was like a child, charmed by his own ability to respond to the music. There was a point when our conversation somehow got into a negative space. Groucho was equally bitter about institutions such as marriage, which is like quicksand, and individuals such as Lyndon Johnson, that potato head. Eventually, I asked, Does anything give you hope? Groucho thought for a long moment. Then, he just said a single word. People. After a while, he started chuckling to himself. I hesitated to interrupt his revelry. Finally, he spoke. I'm really getting quite a kick out of this notion of playing God, like a dirty old man in Skidoo. You want to know why? Do you realize that irreverence and reverence are actually the same thing? Always. Thanks for listening. That wraps up this week's show here on DFM.nu. Tune in for ubRadio Salon each and every week at this very same time. Check out the DFM broadcast schedule for more live programs worldwide. Also, please donate to the station by clicking the bright yellow donation button and keep these kinds of things alive and on the air. We really need your help. ubRadio Salon archives are available at the Internet Archive, archive.org. Podcasts are also available at iHeartRadio and TuneIn Radio. Video clips from the show are available at vimeo.com, UBUIBI. This has been Austin Rich, here from the remote wilds of the Lava Lamp Lounge in beautiful
really fun.
Anywhere, Anywhere.
Oh, you can't hear me.
We'll be back again next week. Thank you.